Hi everyone, excited to be here with you today. So this topic, I saw a few hands raised, but there were some people whose hands weren't raised, and you might be thinking, why this subject? If you came to a customer success conference, it probably means you're pretty committed to your career, so why would we even explore this? And my answer to that is careers are not linear. And I think I've noticed this also with progress in general. It tends to be a pendulum. I think today of all days, we've experienced a little bit of that with the recent overturn of Roe v. Wade. So when you're thinking about where you're taking your career, it's always good to know what your options are. And also you can use this when you're leading your customer success teams if you happen to be sitting in a leadership position today. So the next question you might have is, why is somebody who spent 15 years doing customer success related positions talking about this subject? And my career, while still in one area, I have worked with over 20 of the team members that I've led to pivot into leadership roles or into cross-functional roles that align to their career goals. And that's actually been one of the top ways that I keep my team engaged. I do it personally because I love it, but I also see that when my team member knows that I have their back, when they know that I'm going to help them get where they want to go in their career, they care a lot more about working with me and doing what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So actually, while I have this official title of VP of Global Customer Success Management, the career title that I'm most aspiring to is actually a career coach. And since I have this and the screen, I'm officially giving myself that title today. And I'm going to take you on a little journey of how you can use this as we kind of go through. So I'd say also one of the things here in terms of some experiences I've had in my career. So I started out originally thinking I was going to be a lawyer. I'm definitely not a lawyer. I'm so glad I didn't become a lawyer. And with that, I found that I ended up in account management because of a network of friends that I had. From there, I interviewed at a customer success management company for a role at a software company in customer success management, and I actually didn't get that job. And that really hurt me because I loved this company so much, and I decided, you know what, I'm not giving up on this. I made friends with a recruiter. I referred 2 of my friends to get that job in other roles in that company. They became my internal advocates, and then a year later, the company came back to me, gave me an offer that was $20K more than what they had originally intended to pay me, and they also didn't even make me interview the second time around. So there's a lot of different ways that you can land where you want to go, and hopefully what we cover today helps you have some of those tools in your toolkit. So we're going to figure out where to start, why customer success, how do you pivot cross-functionally or advance into leadership, and finally, what are some principles that can get you ahead in your career in general? Because I think ultimately, this is a truth that at least I've experienced. I don't know, maybe show of hands, who else has experienced? You don't always know what you want to be when you grow up. Has anyone ever had that feeling?
Yes.
Love that yes. I hated when I was a kid and I got asked this question. The reason I said I was going to be a lawyer is because I got asked that question from the time I was in junior high. My mom was a lawyer. I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer like her. I want to be successful. Cool. We don't know. Customer success didn't even exist as a career when I was being asked that question, right? So where should we start? I think the answer to that, it's kind of obvious, and I use the word love a lot. You might say enjoy or like, depending on how you feel about working in general. But figuring out what it is that lights you up every day. Like when you come into work and you have something that happens, what is that thing that gets you excited that you're like, actually, I'm glad I made it here today. Like I'm glad I'm on this stage talking to you people. Like that's something I love. Another thing I love is really helping my team know what they love and helping them get where they want to go. That's something I'm passionate about. And that's why I want to be a career coach and am today. So I'm going to ask you guys to take a minute and think about it. What are some of the things you love and or enjoy about your day-to-day job? Write it down, put it in your phone, however you want to think about it, because we're going to come back to this later. But I'd really challenge each of you to question, what is it? And maybe there's a theme. Is it problem solving? Colby did a good job talking about problem solving earlier. That is such a core of what we do. Is that what gets you excited? Is it the people aspect? Is it messaging? There's so many different things, but what is your thing? What is your thing that lights you up and brings you joy when you get the chance to do that. Okay? Keep on to that. The next thing to think about is, okay, you now know what you love. Where should we start? Well, obviously, where we are. We're at a customer success conference, so I assume everyone in this room has some tie to customer success, even my husband, who has it through his relationship with me. So why customer success? I think growth is a really obvious answer to that, because the customer success profession essentially exists because of growth and the shift in retention model. As more and more companies have evolved to be subscription focused, it became more important to actually make your customers successful. So it's about growth as a profession, but it also is about individual growth as well. If we look at the industry, 25% growth year on year is the global customer success management market. So it's interesting, that means that there's more roles being added in this field. This was actually a few years ago when I went to Pulse in person, I think that was 2018, LinkedIn said that it was 8x the number of customer success titles that were being posted on LinkedIn. So it seems like the growth is maybe stemming a bit, but it's still going strong. And in addition, customer success management tends to be in the profession of IT and services, or in the industry of software and IT services, which is also a top 5 growth industry according to LinkedIn's workforce report. So coming back to another answer for why customer success, it also has a lot to do with transferable skills. So I think everyone in this room who has had anything to do with customer success knows that it takes a lot of talents. For example, communication being number 1, relationship building probably being number 2, proactivity, strategic thinking, analytical skills, and resilience, which is probably the most important of them all. All of these skills are what make customer success managers successful, and I would argue can make you successful in absolutely any field. You have to have communication, relationship building, proactivity, strategic thinking, this list goes on, to do well in most jobs. And so when you've done customer success, it's setting you up really well. So how do you then, if you have thought about, if you were some of the people who raised your hand in terms of thinking about where you might pivot, what are those obvious options? I think one thing that I really love is this idea that it's not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. I don't know if you're a leader in this team, you've had people reporting into you who just want to get ahead. They say, I want to be the CEO, or I want to be the VP of customer success, I want your job. There's a lot of tendency to want to move up in an organization, but the reality is, again, it's not linear. People are going to move through maybe a bridge to then be able to go up the ladder. And I think it's really important to be able to recognize that. So how do you go ahead and pivot? Well, I want to illustrate this through some stories of people that I've known who've made these pivots successfully, while also kind of highlighting some of the specific skills that help them do that. So yesterday, apparently Mark talked a lot about where you can hire from. So it's obvious you can hire from sales and you can hire from support. With sales, I think I've also seen the opposite, where you have people going from customer success into sales. In fact, I'm curious, how many people in this room does your customer success org actually roll into sales today? Yeah, so quite a few. So there is already a lot of synergy and harmony there. The story I want to tell is of a gentleman named Joe that I used to work with early in my career. And Joe was coming from the client side. So he had worked in the CPG company, and then he came into our software company and he looked after a portfolio of customers that were CPG customers. And they were loving Joe because he knew immediately what they cared about. He helped make them successful. He hit all of his KPIs, did a stellar job. And so when a sales opportunity came up where he could become a leader in the sales organization, it was obvious for him to be able to make that pivot because he did such a good job with his portfolio. And ultimately, he had that track record of retention and growth. He was amazing at objection handling, and he had champions for days. People lining up to do case studies just because of the relationships he built by knowing about what his customers cared about. He actually ended up becoming the CRO of our company that he worked at. He started as a CSM, moved into sales management, and then moved into CRO, and today he's actually a CEO. The next really obvious pivot, from my perspective, is product, because a huge part of what customer success is all about is helping to make our customers successful and then to scale it. So the more mature our business gets, the more we need to scale, and ultimately to do that, it takes a lot of product thinking. And so I'll tell a story about Audrey. Audrey was actually my boss when I started at the company that originally rejected me and then eventually came back and hired me. And Audrey was interested in customer success, but she actually really loved that problem of how do you scale. And so she took that and started a team that built out a customer portal and helped us figure out how do we create digital experiences that replicate what a CSM does every day. And by taking on that challenge, she built the skill set that then helped her become a product manager. She moved into product for a period of time, and now she's actually a leader within a product organization. She did this by problem solving, focusing a lot on both the product and the customer experience, and then also stakeholder management, because anyone who's ever had to put in a request for a feature knows product managers get a million requests and they have to figure out what they can actually do with their limited resources. And so a huge part of that is maintaining relationships with stakeholders that they're constantly having to say no to. Does that sound familiar? A lot like what we do in customer success. So marketing. This is another one that I think is more obvious, particularly if the software that you are a CSM for has a tie to marketing, because you kind of understand what marketers are trying to accomplish. I worked with, most recently, a woman named Candace, who was on my team as a CSM. She managed a book of business that was one huge customer that had a huge amount of divisions. And so she was basically trying to make Anthem Insurance as successful as possible. And what she did was communicate with the marketing organizations about how they were going to drive adoption of their customers as well as internal stakeholders. And by organizing that really, really well, thinking about how she was going to message at scale, what were the mechanisms to be able to do that, she developed the skill set that made it really obvious when a marketing opportunity came up within our team, or I should say our company, to pivot over that direction. So value proposition, she knew exactly what we were doing with our customers. She knew exactly how to message both internally and externally to the customers of their customers. And then also analytical thinking. Marketing these days is no longer fluffy branding. Well, it still has a bit of that, but it also has a lot of analytical thinking and data-driven problem solving, which again is very common to customer success management. And then this one's actually one of my favorites. I think ops is such an interesting area, and it tends to vary a lot company by company in terms of what operations actually accomplish. When I try to boil it down, in my mind, there's always a better way of doing something, and then how do you do it efficiently over and over and over again, and even more efficiently. Colby, I really liked when you were talking about the race car and exactly like taking those 10 seconds off and the impact it can have. To me, that's the ops team. Like that little race car team is that ops team. So how do you pivot into ops? I think look for those opportunities and how you make your team more effective on a day-to-day basis. If you're able to help your team members do a better job, even if you're a CSM and you're leaning into those projects, that sets you up for developing those skill sets that help you move into that future career. This is actually one of my favorite stories too. Prashant, who I worked with, he was a CSM at the same company with Candace. When I came in, he was a CSM, but he was in love with data-driven problem solving. He just absolutely, that was who he was, in and out, data-driven problem solver. He helped our team figure out when we had our new task management system, how we were going to extract the data to understand how our customers were doing in terms of did we actually finish the tasks and were they seeing the value that they needed to see. And he ended up pivoting into an ops function within the product team, solving some of their problems around their ticketing, and then eventually he became a product manager. So again, a lot of these skills have a lot of synergy, and the reality is anywhere you set your vision, it's possible to pivot to, leveraging the skill set that you have. So now that we've covered the cross-functional pivots, we'll go into how to advance to leadership. I want to simplify this into 3 things. I think this is the most important thing. This is the thing that you can actually prep for. And frankly, everything that I was just talking about in terms of how you take what you're excited about and pivot into, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, that is situational readiness. That's getting ready for the next opportunity that's coming your way. It's almost like exercising on a bike, getting ready to be able to actually hit the road, right? You're just taking those opportunities as they come to build the skill set that you're going to need for your vision. The other thing is luck. I will acknowledge this in my own career. Yes, exactly. It's luck. I was a director for about 5 years. I took another director job in September, and it turned out that the person they'd hired over me wasn't a fit for the company, and so now I'm a VP. That was really luck. I, at the same time, was situationally ready. I'd been ready for quite some time, and so it doesn't feel overwhelming. So just acknowledging it's not always down to anything outside of luck. And then timing. A lot of this is timing, and I think life happens, right? One of my career visions was actually about moving to London. And when we had that career vision, my husband and I had the conversation, and we said, are we going to be setting back our careers by pivoting? He wasn't going to be in the office. He was concerned that that was going to hurt his ability to advance. It's kind of like, well, I'm starting over in a new culture. I might screw things up because I'm an American. How is this going to actually help me with my career? And it turned out to be the total opposite. By going after something that was calling me in my life that I really wanted to go do, I was able to find a person who ended up becoming a leader, who went from a CSM to a VP, and now he's a chief customer officer. And he took me along with him, and he loved personal development of his team, and that's part of where I realized that that was part of my passion. So all of that to say, timing comes into it. You might think that by taking one step in your life journey, it's setting you back on your timing clock, when actually it's launching you forward. You never really know. So just recognizing timing has a big impact, but also it's okay to take time to do other things. I took time to have 2 children. I'm very career driven, as you might be able to tell, and I felt like maybe it was a step back, but then as I'm older and I'm looking back on my life, I still got where I wanted to go, and actually I am a much more well-rounded person for having a beautiful family that I love. So the timing ended up, the first time I interviewed for a director role, I was pregnant, I didn't get it, and that was frustrating at the time, but in hindsight, I still got where I wanted to go. It was just about the right timing for my life. So principles to get ahead, like regardless if you want to pivot, advance, whatever, how do you think about getting ahead in general? And I think simplifying it, 3 things again. Having a personal career vision, knowing what you want. And I would actually challenge us to go beyond a career vision into a life vision. Like I said, I wanted to live in London. That was something that I really wanted to accomplish. And yeah, it wasn't necessarily career focused, but I wanted to have a job while I was doing it. So what is that goal for you? It might be being able to work remotely, especially after the pandemic. Like, some people actually just want that flexibility because it works better for their life. And so if you have a company that doesn't offer that, maybe that's not the right place to be. So making sure you have that vision, whatever that vision is, however it's synergistic for you. Check your vision against that personal value theme. So the theme that we came up with earlier, if you decided to think about that in the time we had, make sure that what your vision is actually is aligned to what you want to accomplish and how it kind of comes together with what you care about and what's going to light you up on a day-to-day basis. And finally, obsessively add value. As long as you know what your value is and you show up every day offering that value, you will build the relationships and the credibility that you need to get where you want to go in your career. So with that, I will go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. So our first question is, without a computer science or software engineering background, what skills should somebody pick up in transition to product management?
So I think product management definitely has a lot to do with interfacing with engineers and telling them how to deliver on an objective. But I think the other side of it is, how does what's being built actually deliver value? How many times have you had a company that you're working for develop something that actually does not meet a customer need? Right? And so the best product managers are able to deliver tools, but tools that actually meet the market need. And so I think that's the strength that CSMs can bring into the product management field.
Any additional questions from, there we go. How do you support when a CSM transition to a new role a few months runway from the transition, for the transition?
Yeah, so you're talking about the timing and kind of that pain that comes along with like when a team member moves away from your team. So I think with that happens. When you're a manager and you're trying to keep a team stable and people are moving places, I know that like some of the tendency is like, no, don't leave my team, you keep it really stable. But in reality, if you don't help people get where they want to go, a lot of times it becomes a surprise, right? Like somebody will just end up handing a notice because they've been wanting to do this for years and you were never asking them. So I would say it does sometimes lead to some inconvenience, but I would say probably the conversation that Mark raised yesterday, like always be recruiting and be recruiting from sales and support and other functions and create a greenhouse where this is the ethos. So it's not that you're just always giving your team to other people, but you also have a pipeline coming in, and then it can be kind of like a talent development machine.
Awesome. Cool. And then what advice do you give new managers on managing team members who want to leave almost as soon as you start to lead them?
Yeah, so I think the reality is if somebody, well, okay, so I think there's two. So one is if somebody gets a job and then immediately you know it's the wrong fit, right? Like how many, either you've experienced it or you've seen somebody come into the company and then like the culture is just like not a fit, it's just not working. So I think when that happens, you just need to acknowledge it and deal with it as soon as possible, because basically the longer you leave it, it starts to become, I'm going to go ahead and use the L word, liability, because basically that person doesn't want to be there, they're not doing a very good job, and whatever they're doing on a day-to-day basis probably isn't helping things move forward. So I would say in those situations, deal with it as soon as possible. If we're just talking like eager beaver, like this is scenario number 2, this person really wants to become the chief customer officer and they're just so driven, that's cool, harness it. Okay, this is what you have to do your day-to-day job. We're gonna make sure you're doing that. Here's what you can do extra on top of this to develop the skill set you need to go here. So I constantly harness the energy of people like that to be able to propel the organization forward. So you can meet both goals.
Awesome. And then how do you keep the synergy with clients when your CSM team is turning over constantly?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now that happens a lot. I think that turnover is something that's just challenging. I mean, first of all, I think the culture of your company will impact the retention. So if you're seeing turnover, you might do the 5 why exercise that Colby introduced. Like, what is behind, what is actually the reason for the attrition? Are we not compensating accurately? Like, is it that there are some value issues? Like, there's so many different reasons that people want to leave. Figure out what that is and go and actually tackle that problem would be probably one recommendation. And then another is, I guess, documentation, having processes so people can come in quickly and out, like kind of more practically, that it's easier to switch people out when you need to, but that's hard. It's just a hard place to be.
Awesome. And then what would you say has been the most important step in your career journey?
Most important step in my career journey. Yeah, I mean, look, I think sometimes doing the things that your company needs, like what we were just talking about, like the cultural piece, I pay a lot of attention to that. I was at a company that was in the social goods space that didn't have parental leave. And so one of the things I look back on is leaning in and actually getting that fixed for all of the employees that were part of that company. It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my career journey. And the rest of it is just like the adventure of it. Like, I can't name one specific thing, but just constantly leaning into the adventure of the journey.
Awesome. And then you talked a little bit about situational readiness. What were some of the things that you did to, I guess, get situationally ready? Yeah,
I mean, it's tackling the hard problems, right? Like, I think we talked about swim lanes earlier, and I think swim lanes are important for making sure that we're all moving in the same direction and that there's clarity and things like that. But I also challenge swim lanes from the perspective of like, how do you actually make an organization better? How do you actually make customers successful? How do you actually, like, sometimes you have to cross those lines and come together with people to go and solve what's actually gonna make the difference. So that's how I would answer that.
Awesome, cool. Any additional questions from the audience? Awesome, thank you so much, Jess.
Yeah.